I'm Rob, I'm married to Whitney. We've got 3 kids, Judah, Remy and Auden. We go to PM and have been there for a while, and I work as a GP here in Newcastle. As a doctor, one of the things that struck me about the COVID crisis is the amount of stats that have been thrown at us. In particular, the amount of people that can be affected in really serious ways. Whether that's the media reporting how many people have been infected, or the amount of people that have died. But it's easy just to focus on those numbers. I think it's a lot more than that. I think it's families and communities that are affected. Whether it means it's people in isolation that aren't allowed to see their friends, and that might affect their mental health. Or it might be the passing of a loved person that, and how much that can rock and pull apart a family. I think that's the really tough thing. In my role as a GP, death is something that we often come across, fairly regularly. It's a part of life, and it's a part of life that we don't talk about, and it gets kind of swept under the rug. Personally, I guess I was first exposed to it when my dad passed away around about 11 years ago now. When I was 10, I think it was, he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease. I remember him pulling me and my sister at the time into his bedroom and explaining kind of what was going to happen, and we really didn't know at the time. And that moved on, like he would be playing with us and doing all the normal things. But then we'd see him slowly kind of deteriorate. He went from walking normally to walking with a cane. He went from walking with a cane to then being in a wheelchair. People used to have to help him get around. And the last couple of years he would spend in the bed, and then finally on something to assist with his breathing as well. And so death became very real. Like we would see someone who was mentally there, but he would just he'd be getting weaker and weaker every day. I think that the thing with Dad though is he had this hope. And I think that's what was really different about Dad. He believed in Jesus, and he had a very real faith. He was committed to God's word, and I think that's death was different in that situation. He was able to communicate with his friends, and even though his body was kind of fading away, he had this spark inside of him, and you knew that there was something more to his life. I think you saw this transition in his life from when he was confronted with this really horrible disease, and you saw all of a sudden he just realized what this life meant, and we would see him turn to his Bible and turn to his faith. He'd constantly be reading from God's word and be taking instruction from that and learning about what this meant for his life, for his relationships, for his friendships. And despite this life being somewhat shortened, he could see beyond that and grab great strength and resolution from that as well. I think the way that our dad spoke to us and communicated in the last 10 years of his life had a profound impact on the way that we parent now. I think we realise that there's so many opportunities when we're engaging with our kids at their level, and we realise that there's so much more than TV shows and what social media is banging on about. We realise that we need to be understanding their little minds, and we need to be directing them towards the important things of life. And for him and for me, that's Jesus Christ. I think the way that the resurrection impacts and the way that I look at Dad is, I know that it didn't end there. My dad wasn't just someone who lived in my life and then he all of a sudden disappeared one day. He had a real and a living hope. And I know that now it's through that resurrection that he is now with Jesus. It's a hope that is assured, and it's amazing that one day I'll get to meet with him again. It can get really confusing. You have one person telling you that they're absolutely certain and they're right, and then you get someone else saying the exact opposite. In work, we have the same thing. We've got journals and these articles, and we're reading them and constantly trying to figure out what's right. I think for me though, when you look at the historical Jesus, you see that Jesus lived, that he died, and that he rose again. That has so much more meaning than a journal article or whatever's in fashion that time of year. This is something which is eternal, and it affects everyone. In this COVID climate, where death is very real, I think we can look at Jesus, his death and his resurrection, and I think from that we can get real and living hope.